listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you, and welcome to The Briefing. There are few stories that have sparked the legal, political and media storm that came after Brittany Higgins went public about being sexually assaulted in Parliament House in 2019. It led to criminal charges, defamation suits, corruption probes, and a years-long media spectacle covering every facet of it all, including fresh allegations aimed at her rapist, Bruce Lehrman. In today's two-part deep dive, we're going to unpack everything that's happened since, from the courtroom sagas and costly payouts to the latest James Bond-esque investigation. That chat is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spyrou. It's Wednesday, the 24th of September.
Hey Tara, and to you listening, starting in the US where we have a date.
Woohoo! What for?
Well, after a no-show back in June, months of back and forths and mounting criticism from the opposition and the media, the White House has confirmed this morning that Anthony Albanese and Donald Trump will meet in Washington next month.
Yay.
Finally. The confirmation comes just hours after the US president addressed the UN General Assembly in New York this morning, where he took aim at the 10 countries, including Australia, who yesterday told the UN they were now recognizing Palestine as a state.
Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities, including October 7th.
And that wasn't the only thing he blasted in his 57-minute speech that went well over the 15-minute limit. He also criticised international efforts to fight climate change.
It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail.
He also told European leaders that they needed tougher immigration controls.
It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you, I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell.
Oof. And he also claimed that the UN wasn't living up to its potential or promise to deliver world peace.
Yeah, I mean, all of these comments are very unsurprising, but I think the interesting thing for us is that Albo's actually set to pitch our government's Future Made in Australia plan to investors today. So that's our plan, which is pivotal to the transition to net zero. We've seen extracts of his speech where he will talk about the world's shift to clean energy and how Australia can offer the world and these investors the technology and resources to make that happen.
Yeah, and while we know Albo and Trump's face-to-face meeting on October 20 will focus on our $368 billion AUKUS deal, their demands for us to lift defence spending and US tariffs on Aussie goods, it will be interesting to see if their very clearly different views on climate change throws a spanner in the works.
The bosses of Australia's largest childcare providers have been questioned over horrifying safety breaches and mistreatment at their centres. An inquiry in New South Wales has heard details of mistreatment and abuse of children and babies, including times they were pinched, slapped and left unsupervised. It comes as fresh child abuse allegations at various centres revealed earlier this year highlighted glaring safety and compliance issues nationwide, with parents accusing the childcare giants of prioritising profit over safety and care. Yesterday, the head of one of the largest for-profit childcare companies in Australia, Affinity Education Group, defended its internal processes.
We've had a child being used as a human mop to wipe up their own vomit. You had those reports, didn't you, Mr. Hickey, and did nothing about the culture?
We act immediately. As soon as we become aware of it, we launch a thorough internal investigation.
A sentiment echoed by the country's largest childcare company, G8.
Children's safety is our number one priority.
If it's number one priority, why does it not actually feature in your incentive structure?
Meanwhile, the childcare heads were also grilled over why their pay packets have soared despite having poor safety records, with 100 affinity centres in New South Wales alone recording 1,700 regulatory breaches in 3 years. Now, CEO Tim Hickey told the inquiry he was unsure whether his hefty bonuses, up to $300,000 a year, had been cut, despite them being tied to delivering safe, high-quality centres. Now, the government's promising to crack down on the sector, including giving tougher penalties, and they will introduce trials for CCTV cameras to roll out later this year.
Elon Musk's father, Elon Musk, has been accused of sexually abusing 5 of his children and stepchildren. The 79-year-old's accused of abusing his 4-year-old stepdaughter, 2 daughters, stepson and 5-year-old son between 1993 and 2023 in South Africa and California. According to the New York Times, there's been 5 separate police investigations into Elon Musk to date.
Some of the family members say they've reached out to Elon Musk for assistance via letters where they've detailed the accusations and asked him to intervene, with his assistant responding and the billionaire providing them financial support at times. Elon Musk has denied the allegations, labelling them, quote, false and nonsense in the extreme, and suggested they were concocted to try and ascertain money from his son. Now, according to Elon Musk, he and Elon are very close with a good relationship. However, in previous interviews and biographies, Elon actually said that they were estranged and they didn't communicate much, and that his father had done almost every evil thing you could possibly think of. Elon's yet to comment on these latest allegations.
Back home now, and some great news for the millions of us with student debt. We're going to be pocketing more of our paychecks from today.
Woohoo.
On top of Labor's election pledge to slash HECS and help debt by 20%, which has already kicked in, changes to the way these loans are repaid come into effect, with the biggest savers those earning $70,000 a year, who will now pay about $50 less a fortnight, saving around $1,300 a year.
Yeah, and it comes as the repayment thresholds have also been condensed from 19 brackets to 4. So if you earn less than $67,000 a year, you will not have to make repayments. Now, if you earn between $67,000 and $125,000, you're going to be paying 15 cents for each dollar over that $67,000. If you earn between $125,000 and $179,000, you'll repay $8,700 plus 17 cents for each dollar over the $125,000 figure. Now, if you earn $179,000 or more, if so, you are a lucky bugger. Well, your repayment stays the same at 10% of your total income, but you'll be wiping away your tears with that cash money.
Yeah, look, and the Treasurer and Education Minister have come out to say that this is a great step for young Aussies to keep more of what they earn, easing pressures and helping with the cost of living.
And the movers and shakers of Australian society have been named, Chris, in a top 10 most culturally powerful list by the Australian Financial Review. And in news that'll surprise no one, neither you nor I made that list, Chris. But I digress. Those that have include our beloved sprinting sensation, Australia's answer to Usain Bolt, Gout in at number 10.
Well deserved.
Then Rugby League Commissioner Peter V'landys for the second year in a row. DJ Dom Dollar.
Again,
that one.
well deserved.
That one I can get around. He did attract a record Lollapalooza crowd, so well deserved, I think.
Yeah, then there were some other names that I've genuinely never heard of in my life, but they were also followed by celebrities like Nicole Kidman, which, I'm surprised she's still making the top 10 culture list. We also had a rogue one at number 3. Coming in at number 3 was our e-safety commissioner, Inman Grant, because of her world-first kids social media ban. Well done to cyber safety. And Oscar Piastri came in at number 2, and drum roll please for number 1.
In news that will have her rival social media sensation Cook Baruki rolling in her cookie dough. Recipe Tin Eats Nagi Mehashi took out the top spot, which I don't know. I'm not sure what constitutes a culturally powerful person these days. Subjective list, I guess. But I think I might dispute some on the list. But I do love Gout, Nagi, Piastri and Dom Dollar. So I don't know. Maybe it's a good list after all.
Yeah, I like that it's at least representative of different corners of Australia and different industries and different ethnicities, which is good to see. Look, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up next is our 2-part deep dive unpacking everything that's happened surrounding Brittany Higgins and Bruce Lehrmann since 2022. Stick around, that 2-part deep dive is coming up for you next.
A heads up, this episode discusses sensitive topics, including accounts of sexual assault that may be triggering for some. Welcome to part one of this two-part deep dive, looking into one of the biggest political stories of the decade, leading to a criminal trial, defamation suits and government turmoil, and the two people at the heart of it all, Brittany Higgins and Bruce Lehrmann.
Bruce Lehrmann, the man charged over the alleged sexual assault of Brittany Higgins.
It simply didn't happen.
She was wearing a white cocktail dress.
Everyone should feel safe in their workplace.
Brittany Higgins was a political problem.
This is a political issue. My job is on the line for this.
I think a white lie has had a snowball effect.
Having escaped the lion's den, Mr. Lehrmann made the mistake of coming back for his hat.
So let's start at the beginning. In 2021, the names Brittany Higgins and Bruce Lehrmann were first thrust into the spotlight after Brittany, a then young Liberal Party staffer, went public with claims she was raped by a colleague in Parliament House 2 years prior.
In a piece first published by news.com, the allegations were that Brittany, who was 24 at the time, had been drinking with some of her colleagues at a bar in Canberra, where her accused rapist had purchased rounds of drinks. Nearing the end of the night, she said they decided to share an Uber home together before her colleagues suggested they go to Parliament House instead for some whiskey. Brittany alleged she was affected by alcohol when the pair were let through by security, with CCTV capturing them walking to their boss, Defence Minister Linda Reynolds' office. It's alleged she began to feel unwell and that she lay down on a couch before waking up to her rapist on top of her mid-rape.
I remembered that he was taking a really long time with something, and so it got to the point where I don't know if he guided me there or if I went there myself, but I ended up laying down and passing out on the minister's couch.
That was Brittany sharing the allegations again in a TV interview on Network 10's The Project with Lisa Wilkinson the same evening that the news.com article was first published. Now, according to Brittany, her colleague then left, leaving her alone and undressed, where she was found by a security guard.
They walked in at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was a Friday night, Saturday morning. They basically walked in together. She was wearing a white cocktail dress. I'd noticed that she'd had grass stains down one side of her body on this pure white dress. He seemed to be quite dressed up as well. And it was just strange to us that they were there at that time of night together, wanting to go into the office.
Now, after the allegations came to light, questions began swirling over who the accused rapist was, with Brittany accusing the Morrison government of mishandling her allegations. She said she spoke to her manager and Senator Linda Reynolds after being called in for a meeting in the same room where the rape had taken place. The after-hours access had been reported to Senator Reynolds at the time as a serious security breach after Brittany was found naked or semi-naked in her office in the early hours of the morning.
Brittany said during the meeting, Senator Reynolds did encourage her to speak to the police. She went on to do that, speaking with the AFP, but later withdrawing the complaint, claiming she felt forced to choose between reporting the rape to police or keeping her job as a media advisor, which she'd only been in for a few weeks before the incident.
This is my dream job. I had worked my entire life to get here.
Now, Linda Reynolds strenuously denied this, with Reynolds saying that's not true at all.
There was no indication from me at all that her job was at risk. And in fact, as I said, it was my suggestion to her that she consider talking to the Australian Federal Police.
The then Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, also denied there'd been any government wrongdoing surrounding Brittany's allegations, but did apologise to her more broadly for what she'd been through in Parliament House.
Everyone should feel safe in their workplace, wherever that is. Reports today are deeply distressing. This matter is under consideration by police. At all times, Mr. Speaker, guidance was sought from Ms. Higgins as to how she wished to proceed and to support and respect her decisions.
Now, when this story first broke back in 2021, Bruce Lehrmann hadn't actually been named as the accused rapist yet. However, it went on to spark what became a years-long bitter legal dispute. In April 2021, he was questioned by police, and later that year in August, he was charged, which was the first time he was publicly identified as the man at the centre of the then alleged rape case. Now, ever since he was first revealed as the alleged rapist, Bruce Lehrmann strenuously denied the allegations, and soon after, he pled not guilty. Then in October 2022, he returned to the ACT Supreme Court for the case to go to trial. That case has become one of the most widely publicised in Australian history.
Now, that aspect, Tara, the enormous public interest, created difficulties of its own. You know, there were a number of issues raised before the proceedings even began over whether Lehrmann could get a fair trial given the intense media coverage. The number of people who now recognised him were some of those elements at play here. However, the trial went ahead with a jury, and after over 2 weeks of hearing from all of the witnesses and being shown countless pieces of evidence, the jury began deliberating.
However, they were never able to finish deciding on Bruce's fate, as the judge presiding over the case learnt that one of the jurors had engaged in misconduct. They had brought some academic research papers relating to sexual assault into the jury room that had never been presented as evidence in the case. Now, as a result, the judge decided that she had no choice but to abort the jury, and a retrial was proposed.
The Director of Public Prosecutions at the time, Shane Drumgold, was the one tasked with deciding whether that should go ahead. But while looking into the case and reviewing all the evidence, he decided he wasn't confident in the police investigation. He sent a scathing letter to the Australian Federal Police detailing his concern with their conduct during the initial investigation, accusing them of being committed to securing an acquittal. He's also said he'd been pressured not to prosecute and called for a public inquiry into the police and political conduct surrounding the case.
Which did happen, but it actually found no evidence of systemic police or political corruption. It did highlight some issues with the cops' investigative work, which was labelled inappropriate and unprofessional at times, as well as led to some other legal probes into some information that was leaked. But getting back to what was happening in December 2022, Shane Drumgold calls a press conference, and that's where he announced that he'd chosen to discontinue the retrial against Bruce Lehrmann because it would risk Brittany Higgins' safety and mental health.
I've made the difficult decision that it is no longer in the public interest to pursue a prosecution. The safety of a complainant in a sexual assault matter must be paramount.
Now, while all of that was bubbling away, there were also a few other things going on at the same time relating to Bruce Lehrmann and Brittany Higgins. So hang with us and let's very briefly unpack what else was happening in chronological order to try to keep it simple.
Okay, so in February 2023, Bruce Lehrmann launched defamation proceedings against Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson for that project interview with Brittany Higgins, which detailed the allegations that he raped her.
In mid-2023, Bruce Lehrmann took part in an interview on Channel 7's investigative program Spotlight with journalist Liam Bartlett called Trial and Error, where Lehrmann shared his side of the story.
Did you rape Brittany Higgins?
No, I didn't. It simply didn't happen.
Meanwhile, in August 2023, Senator Linda Reynolds filed a defamation suit against Brittany Higgins over tweets that she and her partner David Shiraz made in 2022 and 2023. Then, in November of 2023, in the federal court in Sydney, the defamation trial brought by Bruce Lehrmann against Lisa Wilkinson and Network 10 began.
So now let's get into that. But just briefly before we do, one important thing to know about criminal and civil trials is that the burden of proof is very different. In a criminal trial, the evidence needs to prove a crime took place beyond a reasonable doubt, while in a civil trial, the burden of proof is lower. Instead, the case only has to be proven on the balance of probabilities. So the judge has to find that it's probable a crime took place and be persuaded of it to reasonable satisfaction.
So on November 22, Bruce Lehrmann, Network 10, Lisa Wilkinson and their legal teams front the federal court in Sydney, and the defamation case kicks off, with Justice Michael Lee, the judge tasked with deciding whether Brittany Higgins was or was not sexually assaulted by her former colleague, Bruce Lehrmann, in 2019. Now, he needed to determine that to find out whether Bruce had been defamed, whether Bruce Lehrmann was identifiable in the project interview, and if he could be identified, whether there were any defences to that, and basically whether he should be awarded damages for any impact that it might have had on his reputation from that interview.
Now, meanwhile, Lisa Wilkinson and Network 10 were relying on the truth defence, arguing that it was substantially true that Bruce Lehrmann had raped Brittany Higgins at Parliament House, and they'd have to prove and argue that throughout the trial. There were some facts that were were agreed on by both sides, including that the pair had gone to Parliament House after a night of drinking with colleagues in March 2019. But where their stories and arguments differed was over what happened in the 40 minutes that the pair were in Minister Linda Reynolds' office. We know what Brittany Higgins and therefore Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson alleged, but Lehrman, on the other hand, was arguing once they got inside that instead of a rape or anything sexual at all for that matter, he claimed he went on to make some work-related notes and didn't see Brittany again at all.
Lehrman's lawyers argued that Brittany had entirely concocted the story and had basically lied to save her job as she didn't want to get sacked over the security breach for being in the office after hours, and basically that things snowballed from there. Now, Brittany Higgins was called to give evidence at the defamation trial to help support Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson's truth defence. She detailed the assault and disputed any suggestions that she'd made it all up for this ulterior motive. Now, Bruce Lehrmann, he also gave evidence at the trial and detailed to the court how the allegations had impacted his life, with his legal team arguing that the project interview had, quote, utterly destroyed his reputation and that the defamation case was his attempt to restore justice. His legal team also argued that he wasn't given enough time to respond to the claims made in the interview and that after it aired, he was easily identified, he was left isolated, removed from group chats, and saying it took a toll on his mental health.
Now, besides Brittany and Bruce, the trial also heard from various others and was even reopened to hear from an additional witness whose evidence went on to become some of the most explosive that came out. It was tended to try and show Bruce Lehrmann's dishonesty and why his account couldn't necessarily be believed. It came from former Channel 7 Spotlight senior producer Taylor Auerbach and related to that Spotlight interview with Bruce that we heard snippets of earlier, and basically the methods that were used to try and secure that interview.
That's right. So Taylor Auerbach said Channel 7 had tasked him with being Bruce Lehrmann's babysitter and that they'd paid a year's worth of his accommodation, totalling more than $100,000 to try and secure that interview. Now, he also said he and 7 went a step further, with Lehrmann requesting to be paid back for costs that he apparently racked up on sex workers and cocaine, which Auerbach said he did use the company credit card for. However, 7 denied ever making that particular payment and Auerbach wasn't able to produce a receipt.
And while Justice Michael Lee said he found Taylor Auerbach had given some credible evidence, he also said some of the claims were inconsistent and couldn't be corroborated. So after hearing all of the evidence and witnesses across about 6 weeks, Justice Lee handed down his judgment.
Mr. Lehrmann raped Miss Higgins.
And making this scathing remark about Lehrmann.
Having escaped the lion's den, Mr. Lehrmann made the mistake of coming back for his hat.
After the judgment was handed down, Lisa Wilkinson and a spokesperson for Network 10 spoke outside court.
It's an unmitigated disaster for Bruce Lehrmann. His Honour has found that Bruce Lehrmann is a rapist.
I sincerely hope that this judgment gives strength to women around the country.
So what then? Well, after the case wrapped, Bruce Lehrmann was ordered to pay Network 10 more than $2 million in legal costs over the failed defamation bid. But he has applied to appeal and overturn that outcome. Now, that appeal was heard last month and we're still waiting to learn when a ruling on that will be handed down.
And that, Tara, brings us to the end of part 1 of this 2-part deep dive into this political, media and legal storm surrounding Bruce Lehrmann and Brittany Higgins. In part 2, we're going to unpack everything that's happened since that explosive defamation case and strap yourselves in, briefers, because, well, there's a lot. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. I'm Chris Spyrou.
I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.